Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services here today, we would kindly ask if everyone would please turn off or silence all electronic devices. Thank you.
We're going to begin our time together with the tearing of Kriya. We rend our garments as an outward symbol of the tear that we feel on the inside with the lost and beloved Sid. Before we tear, though, I invite you and the family and everyone gathered to take a breath, to bring yourself to full presence here and exactly no place else. We say a bracha, a blessing that ends with the words Dayan Ha'emet, acknowledging God as the true judge. Please repeat after me. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Ha'olam Dayan Ha'emet. Amen. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who is the true judge. We say Adonai Natan, Adonai Lekach, Hishem Adonai Mevorach. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Praise be God's name forever. Amen. And Josh will come and tear. You can do so yourself, tearing from the bottom. Welcome, everyone. Father, husband, brother, son, grandfather, and for 8 short weeks, even a great-grandfather. Sidney was a lot of things. He loved travel, fine automobiles. He was, most importantly, a very supportive father to his girls, to Robin and Stacy. Today, on this solemn day of remembrance for Sid, we celebrate his memory, we honor his life, and we join together as a sacred community for a fitting tribute to what will be, God willing, his life and his legacy. Today we're brought together in loving memory of Sidney Soifer, Shlomo, Ben, Yaakov, Ufega, Zichrono Livracha, of blessed memory. I didn't get to know him in life, but I learned some of the essence of who he was and the values and interests that drove his time on earth from his children and grandchildren, a number of members of this loving family. I learned from them that Sid was a former Navy officer. You just saw the military honors, but he didn't know how to swim, which was apparently a running family joke, Sid even going so far as owning a boat for some time and not knowing how to swim. I heard about his deep love of food and of eating, which he would channel into his belly and into big yummy breakfasts for those who were visiting him and bringing tea, showing his love through getting up early and making the morning pancakes. I learned about his struggles with dementia over the last number of years and the larger challenges that the family has faced with Nana's illness and loss, and now with Sid's. I learned also that he had a way of jumping in front of the camera for a photo op with a smile ready to go. And it struck me because, a picture captures a moment in time. And today, we're going to attempt to capture a lifetime of moments in time with Sid at the center of our collective photo reel, raising up together the best attributes of his life, honoring him, and supporting this family, the mourners. And though we're over a month removed from his passing, still isn't easy. Losing someone you love, who suffered from dementia at the end of their life, losing someone at, I believe it was 93. It's hard to lose a patriarch. But this family has stayed close. We note that everyone was together at Gert's 80th birthday, of which there's a celebrated photo. And this family is together today, too, in what will, God willing, while solemn, will be a celebration of a long life well lived. Our Jewish tradition teaches that while the physical body is temporary, the soul is eternal. So today, we come together to pray for full and complete rest for Sid's ailing body. And as we move through our day, we'll note that his soul is bound to the bond of life, each of you. And we pray for blessings for the continued elevation of his soul. It's my wish that our time together today have clear purpose, deep meaning, and may it honor well Sid's memory. I'm Rabbi Nathan Weiner, a rabbi locally here in South Jersey at Congregation Beth Tikva in Marlton. It's an honor on behalf of myself and my family and my congregation to be present with all of you today. Sidney was the son of Jacob and Fanny Soifer, both of blessed memory, husband to Nana of blessed memory, and brother of Paul, Eva, and Mickey, also all of blessed memory. Survived by his daughters, Robin and Stacy, and Stacy's husband Bill, his siblings, Sylvia, Gert, and Albert, his grandchildren, Erin and her husband Tyler, Michael, Thomas, and Thomas's wife Brittany, and Laura and her wife Melissa, his adorable, brand new great-grandchildren, Weston and Chatham. I hope I got all their names right. May your love and support for one another carry you through this difficult transition. So as I mentioned, we have a couple of goals ahead of us this now afternoon. First, we're going to perform the mitzvah of Kavod Hamet, of honoring the deceased. We're going to raise up Sidney's memory and honor his life. We're going to keep our kavanah, our intention there. Closer to the conclusion of our time together, we're going to switch from kavod, of honoring, to nichum avelim, comforting the mourners, as they recite for the first time the mourner's Kaddish. But I'm now going to recite Psalm 23, a psalm universal across the Abrahamic faith traditions at moments of grief and loss. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo achsar, a psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. I mentioned that I didn't know Sid in life, but it's important that you hear from some folks who did as to why they loved him. And you're going to hear from his 4 grandchildren today. You're going to hear from Laura and Thomas and Michael and then Aaron, which I understand is youngest to oldest. That's the order. So I invite up first to speak Laura.
afternoon, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Laura, and I'm the youngest of Sid's 4 grandkids. I would like to thank you all for coming today to honor the life and memory of our grandpop Sid. While it's very difficult to capture the many traits of our grandpop, there are a couple key memories that stand out to me. Whenever we would come to visit, you could find Sid in one of 2 places. The first place was on the couch, snoring while resting his eyes, with golf on in the background. After sitting next to him for a few minutes, he would open one eye and give you this little half smile, just enough to let you know that he knew you were there. The second place you would find him was in the kitchen. Whether cooking or eating, he was pretty much always in the kitchen. He was always ready to prepare you whatever you wanted to eat and loved getting you to try new things with his secret ingredient, which was really just Lowry's seasoning salt. But as much as he loved to cook, he also loved to eat. I have a distinct memory of watching him take multiple trips to the kitchen to sneak snacks before dinner. Some of my personal favorites were multiple handfuls of chocolate chips from the baking cabinet and literally all of the skin off of a rotisserie chicken before dinner. Second to Sid's love of food was his love of music. You could always catch him singing the oldies like Frank Sinatra, loud enough for the whole house to hear. As a young girl, I remember him bouncing me up and down on his knee while singing Dance with the Dolly, which originally came out back in the 1940s. I've really grown to appreciate jazz and swing music because of him. The last few years were challenging for Sid and for our family as his health declined. But as you hear from my cousins and my sister today, you'll notice some common themes of how we will always remember him. Although he never got the chance to meet his great-grandsons, I feel very lucky to have so many wonderful memories to share with them. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of the family, thanks for coming. And really, I know these days are tough to be here, but it is nice to see everyone, especially those we haven't seen in quite some time. It's really challenging for me to sum up my grandfather, Sid, in a few words or even an entire monologue. I mean, he was such an interesting and deep person. And what I want to do today is just share at least a few memories and thoughts I have as I reflect on my time with him, my cousins, and my brother, and give some of the really funny and memorable pearls that we all kind of remember about him. But I just wanted to kind of give a few things that I have thought about him and sort of the life lessons that he sort of passed on to me. I think first, and perhaps most importantly, he passed on the appreciation of feeling close to your roots. As you've heard a couple of us say already, he had really a strong affinity for Brigantine, the beach, the ocean, and especially Atlantic City. He and my grandmother Nona provided for us a really wonderful place to grow up and be a part of and enjoy our time together as a family with the Brigantine house. And it's really, for me personally, not only shaped experiences with my family, but also my time with the ocean and my love of surfing and the beach. And I really attribute that to him establishing that for us. I also will really miss riding bikes and walking with him on the Atlantic City Boardwalk. He loved Atlantic City. That was his home. He spent a lot of time there growing up. And I always felt like there was a special aura about him when he was in AC. He really loved it there and was really his best when he was walking on the boardwalk there. And even years later, as AC had transitioned a lot into a different place, he still really loved it. Secondly, he really made me appreciate who we are as people and good company through food. As you've heard said, there's gonna be a lot of funny stories about food and Sid. But we really had a lot of special time sitting at the island and bringing tea together in the mornings. We also enjoyed White House subs together, mussels. He loved mussels. Uncle Bill knows that especially. He used to love when he made that for him. But my very special and sacred food that I enjoyed with him was whitefish salad, slice of tomato, an onion, salt and pepper on a bagel. That was our sacred morning food. Not only was it, for me, it's a food that we shared together and talked a lot over breakfast, but you know, to me it spoke also culturally who he was. He's our only Jewish grandparent, and to me that food makes me feel close to him and who we are ethnically and as people. And I know that sounds kind of wild, but that is something that is really meaningful to me and I think to all of us. And so it's really something that I'll remember about him. And I just want to make an honorable mention. We did go to Kibitz Room like 5 or 6 years ago with Kevin, and he just absolutely tore up the pickle bar and strawberry initiatives. He loved all that stuff too. So. And blueberry blitzes. Thank you, Kevin. Yes, you're right about that. The last thing is he made me really realize the importance of owning who you are. Sid was a very assertive and confident man, and I really aspired to be that same way. He just always seemed to kind of know what to do. He made his moves in life very decisively. He had just an unbelievable, undeniable charisma and confidence about him. Something that really symbolized that for me is the S there that you'll see on his urn. He wore that very proudly, and that to me just sums up who Sid was. It was always around his neck, always laying on his big, hairy gorilla chest. And to me, it might as well have been like a Superman-esque, because he was really just someone who was just a charismatic, really presence, and really going to miss him. And so thanks to everybody else. I'll turn it over to Mike next.
Once again, I want to thank everybody for coming out this morning/afternoon. For those of you who know me, good morning, good afternoon. For those who don't, my name is Michael Kiak. I'm Tom's brother, Sid's grandson. Sid, or as we used to call him, Grandpa, was a pretty legendary figure in my mind. He was the unspoken mayor of Captain's Landing in Brigantine, the ambassador of Brigantine Golf Course, and one hell of a magician. But most importantly, he was a loving sibling, husband, father, and grandfather. He had a very contagious way about him that made everyone around him feel like they knew him, or at least pretended that they knew him. He also knew how to instill fear in you when it needed to happen. I have many vivid memories of Grandpa, and I'd like to share a few of them with all of you. I will always remember the rumbling and bubbling sound of Grandpa's boat engine and the smell of exhaust fumes before setting off for our fishing adventures. We'd catch flounder and sea bass, and upon our return, Grandpa would fillet the keepers. As a child, I could not help but gag at the sight of the fish guts all over Sid's hands, and I used to coin the term fish hands for Grandpa. Always skeeved out by that. And I remember a few times he took me golfing down at the links in Brigantine. We'd walk past several club employees. They all had their name tags on it. You could read them very clearly, but Sid never knew anybody's name. It was, hey, Jimmy, how you feeling? Or, hey, Billy, this is my grandson. You know, he's a real ace. And I was no ace. But he made me feel like I was a club pro, and I really appreciated that. I also remember he taught me how to prepare the most epic breakfast dish using eggs, fried onions, cheese, and that secret ingredient, Lowry's seasoned salt. He'd say things like, "Attaboy, Mikey," and I'd flip the breakfast omelet all over the stove, and then I'd shovel the mess back into the pan, and he'd instruct me, "Now, Mikey, don't you forget that secret ingredient." That was encouragement, even though the kitchen was still a disaster. I also remember when we were young enough to believe that Grandpa could make quarters disappear and nickels disappear. I thought he was just, the next David Blaine. And he'd do things like, "Now watch," and he'd take the quarter, and he'd count 1, count 2, count 3, and the quarter would disappear. Or he'd drop it on his lap, and it would fall to the floor. And it wasn't until we were probably about 15 or 16, maybe 10 or 11, and we realized that he was a total BSer. But I also remember the times that he would instill fear in me when I was misbehaving. He'd give me that death stare with the eyebrow look over at you, and he'd threaten to give you a potch right on your tussie if you were not behaving. And that usually straightened me up pretty quickly. All of these memories define Grandpa and define his role in my life, and I'm sure everybody else's lives. He helped me develop my confidence in and out of the kitchen. He helped me gain an appreciation for listening, singing, and playing great music. And he helped me with accepting my ever-growing chest hair. Sid and Nona, Grandma and Grandpa, their legacy will live on through our family, and I'm very proud to carry that legacy. Thank you.
Going last, but everybody speaks so eloquently before me. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Erin. I am Sid's eldest grandchild, daughter of Stacy. Most of what I'm going to say has pretty much already been said, but it should give everybody a pretty clear picture of our grandfather. I find it interesting how much your thoughts about people evolve as you age. My thoughts about my grandfather over my 31 years have done that, but there are a lot of things that have always stayed the same. I'm sure you're gathering from the four of us that we share similar memories or things that we'll remember him by, but these are things that I reflect on today when I see his family and friends who speak so wonderfully about him. The first moment he would see me, no matter where we were, he would always say, "Come here, let me look at your face. You know who you look like? Omar." Omar was our Siamese cat growing up. I'm not really sure if it's a good thing or not, but the first thing he would always say. He always loved singing, as I'm sure you've heard Frank Sinatra and Gene Kelly. He frequented the "I'm Singing in the Rain," singing it just like it was done in the video, very animated, like he choreographed it himself. He smelled so good all the time. I used to correlate that smell to the S on his chest with all of his ridiculous amount of chest hair that always seemed to be popping out of one too many undone buttons on his shirt. My cousins actually did joke, and I didn't really know if I was going to say, but I actually did think my grandfather was African American until I was about 10 years old because he was so tan all the time. This is the perks of being down shore or in Florida for the entire year. Food was a constant, you've heard this. He was always eating. He would walk up to you when you were eating, get really close and say, "What do you got there? Let me get a little bite of that." I felt like I was always having to eat really quickly when I was alone because I knew he'd be coming around soon. I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to visit him with over the past few years, but I'm choosing to remember who he was before his health started to decline. Very tan and handsome, smelled wonderful, always smiling, singing, eating, wonderful man. We're going to miss him very much. Thank you.
It's with these thoughts and memories and the smell of Lowry's seasoning salt in the air that we move to El Malei Rachamim, which is the central prayer of a Jewish memorial service, asking that Sid's soul be granted true rest on the wings of God's divine presence. I'll read it first in English and then chant it in the Hebrew. If it's comfortable for you to do so, I invite you to please stand. God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant true rest upon the wings of God's divine presence in the exalted spheres of the holy and pure, who shine as resplendence of the firmament to the soul of Sidney Soifer, Shlomo ben Yaakov Ufega, who has gone to his eternal home. For charity has been donated in remembrance of his soul. May his place of rest be in the Garden of Eden. Therefore, may the All-Merciful One shelter him with the cover of God's wings forever and bind his soul in the bond of life. The Lord is his heritage. May he rest in his resting place in peace. And let us say, Amen. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Al Kanfei Hashchina, Malot Kedoshim Utehorim, Kezohar Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Shlomo ben Yaakov Ufega, Shehalach Le'olamo, Ba'avor Shenadvu Tzadaka Ba'ad Hazkarat Nishmato, Began Eden Dehemenuchato, Lachen Bal Harachamim Yasdirehu Besetor Kenafav Le'olamim. B'tzror, b'tzror hachayim et nishmato, Adonai hu nachalato, v'yanuach al mishkavo b'shalom, v'nomar, Amen. Let's remain standing as we've now concluded our obligations to Sidney. And we transition ourselves from ones who have come together to uphold his dignity to a community of consolation for the family. This is the Nichum Avelim, the comforting of the mourners that I spoke about before. And we're going to form a community around them, a minyan, a quorum, for the first recitation of the Mourner's Kaddish. The Mourner's Kaddish is a prayer in the Jewish tradition that Jews say for a period of time after someone in their immediate family passes away. Yet it doesn't speak about death. The Mourner's Kaddish only speaks words of praise. It begins with the words, Yigadal v'yigadash shemei rabbah. Magnified and sanctified is God's great name. This mitzvah of saying these words are attributed to Sid, because if he hadn't passed, we wouldn't be doing it. So what you heard his grandchildren say about the goodness that he brought into the world, the Jewish tradition, through the Mourner's Kaddish, creates an avenue for that goodness to continue to be brought into the world through this mitzvah. So if you're comfortable reciting with me, you're welcome to do so. I believe you have it in the booklet on pages 15 and 16. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, v'alma divra kirutei v'amlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'vyomechon u'chayei t'chol beit Yisrael, v'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabba mevorach leolam ulamei omaya. Yitvarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei nekudesha v'rechu. Le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata. Tush bechata v'nechamata. Da'amiran v'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. That last line in English reads, may the one who ordains peace in the heavens inspire us to be God's partners creating peace on earth, for us, for all Israel and all inhabitants of the earth, and let us say, Amen. You may be seated. The family asks, our time is together is drawing to a close. The family has asked that donations in lieu of flowers please be made to Samaritan Health Care and Hospice.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our services here today. On behalf of the family, I would like to thank each and every one of you for joining us here today to honor Sid. So please, everyone, take care, be well, and be safe. Thank you.
Just before everybody leaves, I'm Sid's brother, that's the surviving brother. The story about Sid and his magic, it comes from a store on South Street. We were all downtowners originally in Philadelphia, and there was a famous clothing store. I think it still exists, actually, though I don't think they found it. Crafts Brothers. They were a maker, a seller of suits. And the oldest brother, Jake, actually, but everybody called him Jake Crass. And when you went in, every suit came with 2 pair of pants. And when you went in and you saw him, he would start fitting you, and he really was a magician. He had worked in vaudeville and what have you. And he would start doing magic tricks. And by the time you got done, you were at the register, you had bought everything. And Sid went to work for them for a while. Sid ran the streets, he took pictures, he gave you a card, you could buy a picture from him and all this. Showed up one day with a 1954-55 Buick Century convertible, and when I asked him where he got it, he just did this sort of thing. And he would pick up these little habits, these little shtick, as they say in Yiddish. He'd pick these little things up, and God knows. He loved chicken, you know, the meat off chicken, the skin. Well, the realities are that he loved boiled chicken. He loved the way my mother made boiled chicken. I hated boiled chicken. Everybody else hated boiled chicken, but Sid got boiled chicken. But I tell you this, and to tell you two quick stories and I'll finish. He was the character of characters, both in South Philly and West Oak Lane, where we eventually knew. Everybody knew, quite literally everybody knew. There was just nobody on the street that didn't. It was just part of the part. But he could, as I think Tommy said, or maybe Mike, be a real tough guy. Sid was a terrific pool shooter as a young man. Made a lot of money shooting the pool. We used to go down to Willie Moscone's place, which was right off of South Street. And Willie Moscone was arguably the greatest pool shooter of his time, straight pool shooter. And one night we're in there late. And they had an area where people under 18 could stand and watch, little platform. And myself and a fellow named Marshall Hankin, who now lives in Israel, are watching, and I said, I either said something to the guy or said I don't really remember. And the guy just jumped me something terrible, and he was 25, 28, much larger than I was. So I went and said for it. And he started to say something, and Sid whacked him with the pool cue right across the shoulder. Something like you see in the movie. Because Sid hit, if he hit you, he'd break bones. And he looked at him and says, there's only one person that tells this kid what blank, blank, blank idiot he is, and that's me. Right? So that was my brother. These stories of the magic trick and all that always came from somewhere else. Used to be a guy, doctor in Southern California named Steve Fox, who was also a downtown guy. He used to throw these big parties in Vegas for South Philadelphia guys. Now we're standing there, and we're standing talking to Joey Foreman. And Eddie Fisher, who's sitting there, they were very close friends, these kids, very close. And the Fisher family, my dad and Eddie's biologic father, had a fruit stand down on Pier 51, Philadelphia, now part of the landing. And they used to pick up fruits downtown, and Eddie's father had a convertible. They would stack the stuff up in the convertible. And Eddie came by, and there was a friend by the name of Stan Gambler. Stan was an artist, a sketcher in Vegas, later in his life, very well known, called the Rocket Man, because he signed everything with a rocket. And we called him AC Deucey, because every time we played poker, that's the game he would call. And we walk in, and AC is standing there. And there are a whole bunch of them, Joey Foreman, Bishop, all the guys from downtown, all the Jewish guys from downtown. And we say to Stan, we say, hey Stan, how you doing, Ace? And he said, well, I'm not Stan anymore. Okay, well, his real name was Stan Gamberg. And everybody would have thought that if you're going to change your name from Stan Gamberg, you become Lorenzo Lamas or something. What else do you do? And everybody simultaneously said to Stan, what'd you change your name to? And he says, Sam. And Sid looks at him and said, wait. you changed your name to Sam what? He said, Sam Gamber. So you're not Stan Gamber, you're Sam Gamber. And Sid hit him so hard in the chest, knocked him against the cashier stand. And we're all literally laying on the floor. And we're on the floor in Caesar. And we're laughing our butts off. That's who he was. He could take you to a pool room and pick your pocket while he was doing it. He would Sid hung out with a guy named Phil, a guy we call Phil Bones. Phil Bones is his real name, Phil Bones. So Phil Bones was about 6'5" tall, and as handsome a man could possibly be. He was just gorgeous. And these two guys ran around the city doing stuff, and I will finish with the story. One day the phone in the house rang. We had one phone in the hall, like everybody did. I picked up the phone, I must have been 10, 12, and I put my hand over the phone and said, hey, are you Tom now? And he said, why? And then he looked at me and said, a girl? And I said, yes. That's who my brother was. He was, and you know what he would be so happy about today, right now, this place? He's still the star of the show.
Thank you, everyone.
Nice to meet you both.
Sorry, Ron's coming. That's good to see you. Take care.
I was trying to pull my dress down to carry my purse, but my purse was banging on
He's basically